Hello, everybody, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today, I have my good friend on, former Oscar nominee David McGowan from Ravenswood Media, the owner of Ravenswood Media, and we are going to be covering dystopian films exclusively. I think for like the next 4 weeks. And to start it off, we're starting off with a double feature of Metropolis and George Lucas's first ever film, our first ever feature film of his first three feature films, before he kind of fell into the Star Wars zone, THX 1138. And to start off the conversation, I wanted to talk about what was, from what I found out in my research, the first ever feature length science fiction film. Of course, that could be inaccurate from the IMDb notes that I gathered. Metropolis, Fritz Lang's 1927 Metropolis, a movie that was absolutely visually mind-blowing for its time, a film that had an enormous budget. If you adjust it for inflation, this movie was made for 5 million Reichsmarks, and which translates to about $200 million in 2007's budget. So if anyone's good with math, try to figure out for the inflation what that would be for 2020. This was an incredible picture, although, as H.G. Wells said, he thought it was incredibly silly, considering the simplicity of it. You know, how the heart just needed to be the mediator between the mind and the hand, and then everyone was happy. There's a few thoughts I had on it, but I mean, overall, it's still on a technical level, absolute monumental achievements. It's a movie that blows me away in that regard. And even for a short film at 2.5 hours with its recently, or not recently, but its restored version, I think maybe from 2007, but I could be off. For 2.5 hours and for a silent film, it's wow, it's
Did you
amazing.
watch it with a music soundtrack, or did you watch it totally silent?
I watched it with the soundtrack this time around.
Was
Uh,
it the modern soundtrack that they added in the '70s with Freddie Mercury and Adam Ant and all that, or was it?
um, no,
Uh,
this was the 2.5 hour version by the Criterion Channel. So it's pretty much the most pure version you could find, I
yeah, I
believe.
think they came with a score.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, when the movie went out, silent movies went out, especially big blockbusters like this, the theater, like Chicago Theater downtown in the Loop, would have an orchestra play to the movie, and they'd
Mm-hmm.
have cues for when the music would start. They would have a scored pieces. So I was just wondering if you went that deeply into it, that you think it was the actual score that they had wanted for the movie.
From what I gathered, there were multiple scores made for the film, but there
Oh, for
was
sure.
an original.
Okay.
And if I were to guess, this probably had the score that they intended for the movie. As a matter of fact, the score was so intrinsically used with the film that Lang would often play the score on the set. So then the actors
Oh,
could
neat. Yeah.
correlate their actions to it, which
Wow.
maybe explains how it was so in sync and in tune with everything. I wanted to get what do you think of Metropolis? I mean, I know you were a springing 21-year-old man when it first came out. No, uh,
Now it predates me by a few years,
yeah, no, I'm kidding. I'm
but
kidding.
that was even back then. It never went away really
Hmm.
uh, through my film evolution. It had always been on the near the top of my list. There are a couple other silent films that I prefer over Metropolis. but still, Metropolis is a way cool film. But I wanted to talk about, you brought up the budget, and like, I
Mhm.
hadn't realized it was $200 million in today's um, dollars, which I
Yeah.
guess is on par with what movies cost now, right? The big blockbusters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that average, or is that a high cost for a movie today?
Even for today, that's a high cost, I
Okay,
think.
good.
Yeah.
Well, you got to remember in 1927 when this, or 25 when
When
this,
they started filming it, yeah.
yeah, would have I think it was called UFA. I forget what the German, what it stands for in German, but that was the
Mm.
studio in Germany. And Germany in the 20s was, I mean, not just a rival of Hollywood. I think in some ways it eclipsed Hollywood,
Yeah.
especially in Europe.
Oh
And
yeah.
they were the dominant force in cinema at that time. Plus, they had some really talented filmmakers
Mhm.
that were making just stellar movies. Everybody was talking about, you know, the Cabinet, Dr. Caligari,
Mhm.
and that one about the doorman, Ernst
I know
Lubitsch.
what you're.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that they had a film that was this incredible blockbuster, could have been part of their marketing ploy, just to bury Hollywood with some, out of control movie that would just go global. I
Yeah.
mean, you just have to keep that in mind that, Germany wasn't a backwater. Germany was like the leading cinema center of the globe at that time.
Yeah, they I didn't realize that until you brought that up just now, because they really did, like, when it came to their silent films, they were light years ahead of everybody. And this movie really displayed that. I mean, if you think about the visual effects to today, I mean, it's like how in
They're doing
the
it through optical printing, not
yes,
CGI. They're actually doing optical printing. They're having to marry film, several layers of film onto one another. And,
yeah,
that's a subtractive process. Every time you make a copy of a film, you really degrade it. It's not like digital
eh,
media.
yeah.
So you had to be really careful, and you had to sort of think backwards from where you wanted to be, and think about, okay, if we're going to do this effect, our original has to be shot and then copied a couple times so it's not mismatched.
Yeah. Well, the incredible thing with it is, like, they didn't have optical printing back then. What they did was they created a matte effect. It was a large mirror that was placed at an angle to reflect a piece of artwork, while live
Oh,
footage
that,
was
yeah,
projected onto the reverse to expose the projected footage. So the
right.
silvering on the back of the mirror had to be scraped off in strategically appropriate places. So if there was like one mistake, it would ruin the whole mirror.
Yeah, you're talking about the background shots of like the city with the
Yeah.
flying machines and stuff. I'm
Yeah.
talking about some of those dissolves, like where the three groups of people are walking towards the camera. Just this,
Yeah.
just a huge crowd of people coming towards the camera. That was a lap dissolve. They were using, and I think optical printing began then. I mean, it optical. They already knew what optical printing was in the 20s. I'm pretty sure, and that's how they would do those kind of effects. They're a little bit different than the stuff that you're describing of the background of the city and so forth. I can see that working with that mirror process. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, because they couldn't, because for those who aren't aware of some of the terminology that we're using here, basically with optical printing, and mostly from what you told me, I gathered this, because I was always wondering, like, with Star Wars and all that, how do they combine the sort of the models that they had with the actual stars in the background? Because I would still see them using blue screens. and stuff like Space Odyssey. How do they combine all that stuff together? And what they did was, they'd have uh, 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 they'd film the model by itself with a blue screen, and then they'd have a background that they had filmed of stars, and then they would take both of those film layers like you would in Photoshop, and you'd combine them together into one concise image, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with this one in 1925, when they filmed this movie, it took a year and a half, by the way, to film. Long time, very long time to film the movie. They had to use this mirror process and basically have everything reflect off of each other and film it in camera. So when you're seeing the establishing shots of the city with the cars, the planes, and the elevated trains moving about, they had to actually use stop motion photography for those, and they modeled the cars off of the newest taxi cabs driving the streets of Berlin. It took them months to build the city model and several days to film the few short sequences that they would have, of some of the cities. Actually, as a matter of fact, the lab ruined the first few shots. So the backgrounds of the shot had been dimly lit to create a greater sense of depth. But the head of the lab, who developed the film himself, decided that was a mistake and lighted the backgrounds. Thereby, he destroyed the sense of forced perspective in the film. So, I mean, this was a strenuous process, to say the least.
Yeah, and well worth it because it's a stellar visual experience. However, there's one shot that I just always bothers me whenever I see the movie, and it's when Brigitte Helm is put down on that table. And by the way, she was hot.
Well, yes. By today, I would say she's a very attractive woman.
Yeah.
Now, easy, David. Okay, this is 2020. All right.
And she's lying on that table, and then they do a lap dissolve of her to the robot face. But for some reason, they didn't choose her eyes as the anchor point, and I don't know why that happened. Because when it dissolves, the robot's eyes are above where her eyes were. Do you know what the scene I'm talking about?
I do, yeah. Where they would transfer her conscious into the android. Who, by the way, for all you Star Wars nerds out there, C-3PO's design was based on
that's obvious. Yeah.
the robot Hell, Hel. I don't know how it was pronounced in Germany, but I know they gave it a different name in the English-speaking versions originally because it sounded like hell. But yes, they designed his look off of the robot from Hell, played by Brigitte, or is it Bridget?
I believe in Auf Deutsch it would be Brigitte.
Yeah, Brigitte Helm, who
and her real name was like Schnittels Fasselnunten Helm, and they
yes, I can see why that is. Yes, I mean she played.
She was only 18 when she started filming.
People looked a lot older back then. I don't know why. Maybe it was the hairstyle, maybe it was the clothing choice, or maybe it was just because the lack of health care that they had back then. Yeah, but she played Maria, who's sort of this angelic figure. She tells the story because there's a lot of biblical references in the film. She tells the story of the Tower of Babylon to sort of like all the workers who are working underground from the large towering city, and she's inspiring hope, and optimism to these people when they have none. And of course, the the CEO, the ruler of Metropolis, who rules above all of them, John Fredrickson, he uh, finds out about, I think, Maria's actions, and it's the mad scientist in the film. I can't remember his name at the top of my head.
Right.
Rotwang, that was it, right?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And Rotwang, he had a wife that resembled Maria, and also he designed the robot off of her, and he wanted to use this robot to manipulate the people to destroy their infrastructure and basically have them rule over them. Now, honestly, that's where I got a little lost in the story. I didn't quite understand Rotwang's motivation, nor did I understand Fredrickson's motivation. Um, it was a little fuzzy to me. Do you understand it at all?
No, you kind of hit it. They were trying
Yeah.
to discredit uh, Brigitte's character,
Mm-hmm.
the real character, from her proselytizing underground,
Yeah.
and sent out her doppelganger to stir up trouble, and I gotta say this. I mean, Brigitte was she's a beautiful actress,
Yeah.
and when I said she was hot,
Yeah.
what I was really referring to was when she was playing the doppelganger.
Right.
That's when, man, I mean, when she's like playing the good girl, she's okay. I mean, she's a pretty actress and all that. But when
Yeah.
they let her loose as that doppelganger that's stirring up trouble and doing those wild dances, that's when,
Mm.
whoa,
And she had that crazy look in her
uh,
eyes too.
yeah, one eye kind of closed and
Yeah.
the other one fully open. Yeah, very sexy. She looked like a Klimt uh, portrait. Yeah, just a
Yeah.
beautiful and hot.
Yeah. She really encompasses the sense of pure evil. Like she was just enjoying the hate that she was putting on everyone. And
Hate and decadence.
yes, yes.
Which,
Cause
really, if you think about it, that's a reflection. This is like what 7 years before Hitler came to power.
mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this stuff is burbling in the public, and art, movies is taking advantage of it, and it's finding a home in the collective consciousness of cinema.
Yeah. And it's funny because years later, Goebbels and Hitler loved this film. And they actually, although Fritz Lang himself was Jewish, they sort of gave him a pass and they wanted him to make movies for them. And at that moment, Lang jumped in a plane, headed to Paris, or I don't know if they, however, he got to Paris back then. And he fled to Paris, and then he fled to the United States because he didn't want to make movies for them. And his wife at the time, they divorced a year later. Since then, she was a staunch supporter of the Nazi Party, and she uh, stuck around in Germany with the Nazis. So
Well,
there's a
Brigitte
lot
too.
to it.
Brigitte was well liked, I think, by Himmler and by Hitler himself,
Mm,
and she wasn't pro-Nazi at all. I mean, she
mm,
was, from what I've read, she was kind of disgusted with it. But evidently, she had a drinking problem,
mm.
and she got into some accidents, and I think in one of them she killed someone during
Oh.
drunk driving accident, and Hitler made the manslaughter charge go away.
Yeah, that's a very tricky situation. I
Yeah,
don't know
but
what
she
I would.
fled in '35. She came to Hollywood, had four
Uh,
kids with a new husband, but she never gave interviews after she came to the States.
There was an interview that she gave years later where she basically talked about what the process was like making that film. And although she admitted that it was an incredible picture, she said the process of it
Oh,
was
right. Yeah,
absolutely
they put her through the ringer.
grueling.
Yeah.
Yeah. To
Especially the time she had to be in the robot outfit.
Yes, yeah, she had cuts and bruises all over her. They molded the out, outfit off of her body, so it's not a stunt woman in there. To quote her, there was an interview where she said the night shoots lasted 3 weeks. And even if they did lead to the greatest dramatic moments, even if we did follow Fritz Lang's directions as though in a trance, enthusiastic and enraptured at the same time, I can't forget the incredible strain they put us under. That work wasn't easy, and the authenticity in the portrayal ended up testing our nerves now and then. For instance, it wasn't uh, fun at all when Grote drags me by the hair. That's the mad scientist, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, to have me burned at the stake. Oh no, that wasn't the mad scientist. That was somebody else. I think that was the man who was leading the angry mob of workers, and this is the robot form of herself. Once I even fainted during the transformation scene. Maria, as the android, is clamped in a kind of wooden augment, and because the shot took so long, I didn't get enough air. Now that's where they burned her at the stake, and there's a crowd of thousands cheering for her to die, and she's laughing and while they're burning her android self, and I guess in real life she passed out in that scene. I mean, she passed out. She got cuts and bruises. There's a scene where the mad scientist is chasing her up this huge building, and I guess it was actually a huge set. And she had to jump on a rope, and she made it on the first take, but she was so bruised up and battered from it, she fled the set just in tears. Uh, it was just a horrible process. Fritz Lang would shoot so much that like the crew had to make him stop shooting.
Yeah.
I think that he like topped Kubrick in terms of shooting. Uh, the shoot lasted 17 months. It was 310 shooting days and 60 shooting nights, and it was finally completed by October 30th, 1926. Uh, by the time the film's shooting budget leapt to 5.3 million Reichsmarks, or over 3.5 times the original budget, the producer uh, actually was fired during the production. So this was I couldn't even imagine what it was like to film that movie. I mean, they used 25,000 extras. Uh, there's a group of little starving children in the movie who actually were little starving children. I think they grabbed like 4,000 of them. There, the workers, they grabbed a few thousand of those. I mean, this movie had.
Although he paid really close attention to the close-ups of the workers. If you look at some of those
Mhm.
faces, they're very distinctive.
Yeah,
Like big mugs, big jaws, big ears.
yeah, and they were
So
also.
he would do grandiose scenes, but Fritz Lang paid a lot of attention to detail.
He did. He did. I mean, this is an incredibly detail-oriented film. Um, and
Did
yeah,
you can you name some Fritz Lang American Fritz Lang movies?
probably not. Not top of my head. I'm still on my path of researching all his films. The only other Fritz Lang movie I saw was M, which
That's it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I was thinking of. Peter Lorre,
that was Peter Lorre's claim to fame.
but that
Uh,
was produced in Germany.
yeah, it was. And there was an English dubbed version. That was his first speaking film. Emma's fantastic. I watched it twice in a row after I saw it once and I'm like, okay, I gotta watch this again. That was an incredibly sort of taboo film. You're talking about a murderer of children, and a town who basically he seemed to have a reoccurring theme between this and them of angry mobs sort of fighting against the system, a social justice angle, which unfortunately Goebbels really liked that social justice angle and took it completely the wrong way. I think maybe Goebbels and Hitler liked the film because in the end, the big corporate guy doesn't get it in the end, but instead everybody's just kind of miraculously friends, which is where the movie was a little clumsy to me. Where all of a sudden, the main character of the movie, Fred Frederickson's son John, uh, basically joins the hand of the angry migrant worker and his father,
Right.
who's the leader of Metropolis. And Maria says, "Join hands together. You're the median." And then they do, and everyone's happy. Yay! And it's like,
Right. That's why it was kind
that's
of
it.
stupid. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like,
They built it up to this big thing, and that's why I mean, the movie fails on that level because they had built it up to this ending that they could not sustain. It's like they had to just wrap it up. It was the story was just going off and off and off, and then finally they come up with this kind of hackneyed ending, and it leaves you with the feeling that the filmmaker wasn't criticizing society, that it was all just a big misunderstanding, and that
yeah.
once people started talking to each other and regarding one another, then everything got well again, which is decidedly a different message than THX 1138.
Yeah, everything just seemed to kind of magically work out. It felt like a very Hollywood ending. Like,
Right.
hey, we're all right. It's a bit like that unearned hug that Stanley Tucci gives Mark Wahlberg at the end of Transformers 4. My God, I was able to link Metropolis with a Michael Bay movie.
Ah,
How about that? But you know what? I mean, I think a lot of the messages of people who are being, I think the beginning of the movie, the whole idea that this CEO wanted to basically discourage, I don't know, why did he want to discourage these workers and tear them apart if they were subservient and operating a system? Like,
well,
that's
they weren't. She was telling them the gospel,
mm-hmm.
that and giving them hope of something more out of life, and that the Metropolis guys saw that as a threat to their sort of numbed, emotionalist, drudge work.
Yeah.
So yeah, once they started to see that there were alternatives, then they started to rebel and started to foment discord. So that was the idea. And you got to remember, at this time in the 20s, this is just when communism had emerged and before it had become like this comic book villain in the West. It was something that was taken seriously. Like, hey, here's a new idea, and it's working in the decadent Russian regime, which up until that point had been looked on as a sort of a despotic, barbarian society. And here communism came in and things were going great. And the movie is kind of hinting at that. And I think that was threatening to particularly some of the right-wing forces in Germany at the time.
Yeah, yeah. From what I understood, it did sort of have a pro-communistic message to it. But again, we have to view everything from these old. I mean, this movie is 1927. My God, how many years ago was that now? A long time.
Yeah,
I don't want to do math.
93 years.
Yeah, okay, there we go. 93 years. Wow. Yeah. So yeah.
But that's very different than THX 1138, which is much more of a like. I mean, the way I took it out was this was the end result of a unharnessed capitalism,
Yes.
that the systems had overcome the components. So,
Yeah.
it was more important what was being produced than who the producers were.
First, they start skipping prescribed drug dosages. Then they begin touching, then indulging in various sexual acts. And the ultimate perversion, love.
Yesterday, you watched THX, and this is your first time seeing it.
Right.
What did you think of it? I'm very curious because it's an
Well,
extremely...
number one, I think that it couldn't have been, it would never have survived, and Lucas probably would not have become who he is today if they had not starred Robert Duvall in
the titular role. Yeah.
You know, he kind of reminded me of Keir Dullea in Odyssey 2000.
Yes, yeah.
That sort of dispassionate yet intense inward acting. You know, Duvall had that kind of that smoldering look in his eyes, yet he was very subdued physically.
Yeah, and everyone in that society was. THX 1138, if no one has ever seen it or isn't aware of it, this, you know, it's very you wouldn't expect George Lucas to direct this movie because he's done Star Wars and American Graffiti and sort of these happy films, right? And this movie is an absolutely dreary, dystopian, hopeless kind of film. And it's, as the sound designer Walter Murch called it, a movie from the future rather than about the future. So you're kind of...
No, that's the other thing that struck me about it. I mean, no, you know, they had no alternative, but it's kind of funny to watch the movie. From our perspective today, and they've got all these you know, video scopes and red buttons, you know, and switches and stuff like that. It's like all that stuff is gone, you know.
It's all predated,
right. But it's kind of quaint, you know, to see it, and you buy it. I mean, even if you're watching it today, you kind of buy, all right, that's the way things work. Like, they actually were going into racks of computer tape. You're probably too young, you don't remember, but like in the 70s, especially banks that had to keep records, they would store all their computer data that would, transactions or whatever happened during the day, any given day, on this reel, almost like a reel-to-reel of magnetic tape. And then they take that to a safe vault. And I remember I saw one like in the late 80s, just underground vault, just went on, cavernous, went on and on and on. And the guy even at that time was telling me, this is not sustainable. We gotta find some other medium.
Oh my God.
To store stuff on, because there's not enough, you know.
Is that when they had those big reels that they were grabbing that had all that tape in it? Like, I don't know what it was, but they had these large circular sort of things.
Yeah, you
that
mean in
like
the movie? Yeah, that's what I'm referencing. Yeah. It was, the tape itself was probably like maybe a half an inch wide or a quarter inch wide, but the reel it was on was like maybe 16 inches in diameter. The technology they use is definitely outdated. I mean, we have to remember this movie came out, I think, like in 1971 or something like that. And this movie was based on George Lucas's short that he made when he was in USC, called THX 1138. Did you see
for Earthbound? Yes. EB was his Earthborn. Yeah, I own the DVD, so they have the short.
And it's a feature length.
The short that it was based on was a short.
How long was it?
It's like 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Is it good?
It's, I mean, for its time, yeah. I mean, today it looks real kind of cheesy and hokey and stuff like that, because, you know, it's basically just this guy running around as people are kind of having this random radio chatter, and he's kind of like, you can tell they filmed it like a parking lot or something like that. And really what was incredible was the sound design in it. You know, much like the movie itself, Walter Murch's sound design is like a film in and of itself. Actually, on the DVD, there's this whole track where it's a sound effects only track. And Walter Murch sort of chimes in now and then and sort of explains how he did everything,
Oh, cool.
because everything was intentionally made to be obscure. So you didn't understand a lot of the dialect that the people are saying in the film. You know, it's kind
Oh,
of like a
that was
lot of,
cool. Like in the
yeah.
background, you're hearing them talk. Like, okay, what about like especially when Robert Duvall is in that white area, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just like laying on the ground, and you're seeing him on video screens, and the two voices you never see the guys are
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, what's this I hear about this code for this?" Well, you got to make sure you don't go over 4.6. And as they're talking this sort of banal code talk, they're torturing Robert Duvall. You know, you see him like putting his arm up, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like you know, you think of the banality of evil. You know, who was that
Mm.
woman? Who's the woman that came up with that? The woman out of Nazi Germany?
Oh, are you the one who made the movies?
No, no,
The
not made the movies. She was the girlfriend of
Hitler?
Heidegger. Uh,
I don't know honestly who that
okay,
is. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
banality of evil. And
Mm.
then the other clue that I thought was really a a blunt statement coming from the movie
Yeah.
was this idea of, you know, capitalism run amok, is that as they're chasing Robert Duvall,
Yeah.
there's this subtext, or this it comes in real subtle, but it's clear, you know, once chasing him uh, goes over what their budget allows,
Yeah.
they'll let him go. And so while he's climbing up that smokestack or whatever it is,
Yeah.
the cops behind him say, you know, hey, we got to go back, and we're over, you know, 6% over budget.
Yeah, 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 yeah. See, I never knew that they stopped chasing him because they ran out of budget until someone told me when I was watching it for like the millionth time in high school. They said like,
Right,
yeah,
because
they ran
it
out
is
of
kind
budget.
of
I'm like,
subtle,
really?
but it's there. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's giving you a clue as to the filmmakers saying that this is a society now that's just based on uh, financial concerns. You know, that people no longer matter. It's the system itself, and the metric on whether the system is working or not is budgetary. You know, how much are you spending? And if it's under budget, then the system's working well. If it's over budget, then, you know, we got to stop whatever we're doing and go back.
yeah. I mean, this movie, it's sort of like a reminder of, hey, this is what's going to happen if we're subservient for too long and we just let the system take over. Because in the end, everything is revolved around consumerism, where they say, buy more now, buy,
Right.
and be happy. You know, so as long as you buy things and as long as you're happy, no, or they drug you up enough, because in this film everyone is constantly told to take their medication and to not worry about anything. The
Anytime they opened up the medicine cabinet, a voice would say, "Hi, how are you feeling?
Yeah, what's
What,
wrong?
what's wrong?" And
Yeah.
can't, I mean, does it strike anybody that, you know, like Siri,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, Siri, or what's the one on Microsoft,
Uh,
Alexis, or
yeah, yeah. Any of those speaking sort of things that you talk to it and you can Google something,
right.
you know. And if
Well,
you're
my phone talks to me when I don't even expect it to. It's like all of a sudden it's
yeah.
talking to me. It's like, whoa, where is this coming from?
Yeah, like do you ever have that thing where you say something that sounds something like "Hey Siri," and then it'll be like, "Uh-huh," and you're like, "Wait, what? I didn't say Hey Siri,"
Right.
and then it'll be like, "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that." Like,
How are you feeling today?
yeah,
Oh man, I mean, just to go back to well, we once mentioned it once, but 2001
Mm.
when Kirley is coming to take out Hal's memory, and Hal
Yeah.
knows it, and he's saying, Dave, I can tell you're upset.
Yeah. Why don't you take a stress pill
Take a
and
stress.
things over?
Yeah, we can talk this out.
Yeah. It's like, oh, now you want to talk it out after you murdered my entire crew.
Right.
Okay,
But the
sure.
point is that these are computers talking to us. People 50, 60, 70, nearly 100 years ago are projecting forward, saying, hey, people of the future, this is what we're afraid of as we step into this robotic computer era.
Yeah.
And we watch these movies and we go, oh, that's creepy, you know, how the medicine cabinet was talking to him. But we don't feel creeped out when Siri says, you know, or Alexis or whatever it is running our house or our phone or.
Mm-hmm. That's why I don't have an Amazon Alexa, because like it can listen into what you're saying. As a matter of fact, there's this video I saw way back where this guy, he would just say like, I wouldn't have my microphone on, I wouldn't have my phone on, I would just mention cat food or whatever. And if I mentioned it enough, it would pop up on Facebook's ad
Right,
feed, you know?
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And people don't get it. You know, people that they're not like, hey, this is getting kind of weird. You know,
yeah.
is somebody talking to Facebook? Yeah,
Maybe we should go back to paper for a little bit, you know?
yeah,
Just, I mean, I'm not saying abandon computers, but maybe use them a little less. And now with this pandemic,
yeah,
we're using the internet right now to talk to each other. And
yeah.
everything we're
And this
saying is
is
being monitored. I'm sure THX 1138 and Metropolis will pop up on my ad feeds to purchase them, you know, or
right.
to rewatch them again. Yeah.
So the difference is that in Metropolis,
Yeah.
it's like the free market is still being controlled by a human being, like
Mm-hmm.
Freighter's dad, you know,
Yeah.
that the magnet, and you can appeal to his humanity
Yeah.
to stop whatever the system had been doing. But by the time you come to THX 1138, the system has completely suppressed all humanity. The system itself has become it's as if the organic human has now become the system. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
more appealing to humanity because the human side of it has died.
Yeah. They used sort of the robot to manipulate everyone's thoughts in Metropolis. And I think like THX 1138 in an alternate universe would take place years after Metropolis, after that whole medium bullshit didn't work out, you know?
Well, listen to this. I mean, it just occurred to me. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right that uh, the what they were doing in Metropolis, the core of the story was to create a doppelganger
Yeah.
that would act like this woman to discredit her. And we've
Hmm.
already seen this with what's called today, it's called deep fakes. They're
Mm.
actually able to use some sort of CGI technology to build a face and animate it
Yeah.
that looks just like a real human being
Yeah. I
and make
mean,
them talk and make them walk. And so we could take Mike Crowley
yeah.
and put him into a porn movie.
Yeah.
And
You could.
you'd spend the rest of your life trying to try to talk your way out of it. And here,
Or would I?
yeah, or into it maybe. But
I really am that big, I
yeah,
swear.
right.
Right. And
But the point being here is that Metropolis had already uh, predicted this deep fake idea with the doppelganger, which is kind of incredible. 93 years ago,
yeah.
they saw the danger of AI before there was AI.
Yeah. And the more we're locked inside, the more we rely on this technology. And I know I'm not gonna abandoned technology. Jesus, I'm going to be using it all freaking day today. You know, I'm going to
Oh,
be,
well, here's another thing
yeah,
is that I wanted to bring up because we're
yeah,
talking about abandoning technology.
yeah.
THX 1138 had definite riffs from Brave New World, all those
Mm,
Huxley's book. And because I think, I mean, it's been a while since I've read it, but I remember at the end that the main character escapes from the Brave New World by going up a tube and walking out into the wilderness. I kind of remember
mm.
that. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I
in
haven't seen it. Yeah. So,
yeah, but there THX 1138 had riffs on that because in Brave New World there were two worlds. One was the city where everybody lived, but they were highly controlled. I think even with sex. Um,
mm,
and But there was this other outer world which was in the wilderness where people lived like those creatures in the parking lot. You remember
yeah. The
they
shell
jumped up
dwellers.
shell dwellers? Yeah,
Yeah.
only they're inside the city. But in Brave New World, the people were on the outside of the city, and I think the main character's mother and father had made a decision. They were in love in the city world
Mm,
and were being persecuted, so they went to the out country, and that's where they had the baby who became the main character. So there's a
mm.
lot of Brave New World in THX 1138.
Yeah. I mean, I always wonder in that movie what happens when THX crawls out of that tunnel into society. Does he just die out in the middle of the desert where there's nobody? Apparently, there was some alternate ending they planned where he was going to see a populated world outside of the tunnel, you know, but we don't, or the shell, as they called it, that they lived in. It would have been interesting, but we don't need a sequel. You know, we don't need to Planet of
No,
the
no,
Apes.
no.
You
That
know,
was great the way it ended. That was really cool. It really
yeah,
leaves you thinking. But
yeah.
also, it also those shell dwellers and
Mm.
Brave New World. Brave New World, I think, was written about 20 years after the Time Machine, H.G.
Mm-hmm.
Wells.
Mm-hmm.
And H.G. Wells, his dystopian future involved two races of people, the Eloi and the Murdochs.
Mm.
Um, and the Murdochs lived underground and were these sort of kind of ugly troll-like creatures that ran the machines underground. And then the Eloi were these elite, wispy people that lived on the surface. And every now and then the Murdochs would take a Eloi and eat it or something like that.
Oh.
It's the idea that humanity would split into two races based on class or capitalism. It began with H.G. Wells, and you're seeing it kind of evolve into movies like THX 1138.
Yeah. And in THX, like it seems like everybody lived in the same class. We don't know who's making the money or who's controlling everything.
No, right.
But the fascinating thing about that movie is that didn't matter. It
No,
was just about the people who lived there. It didn't
yeah.
get involved in the politics. And
Like I said, the humanity part of it was gone. There
yeah,
was no rich person. There was no poor people necessarily.
yeah.
Everything was the system. The system then became the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no antagonist with a face other than maybe Donald Pleasant's SEN character, you
Right.
know. And if you're trying to interpret what the names mean, THX thex is like sex, you know, LUH law is love, and sen sin, you know. So you have sex, love, and sin sort of mixed together.
Oh, that's cool. I never thought about that.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the movie's sort of viewed like an artifact from the future where it is what it is. It doesn't tell you how to feel, it doesn't judge a character a certain way. You just sort of view it and interpret it for yourself. And much like Japanese cinema, where you just sort of see these cultural traditions played out. You mostly just view everything as it is, and it's up to the viewer to interpret what it means, because George Lucas was a big proponent of not explaining anything, just kind of having it presented in front of you. Even
I
Star
don't know. I mean, I think his Star Wars movies, that's all they're doing is explaining it.
Well, the prequels kind of did, but even those, they never really told you what everything means.
I don't know.
Inception explains everything. Oh, I talked about Inception with fellow
What's
critic.
Inception?
Oh, that's a newer movie from Christopher Nolan. Newer. It came out 10 years ago, but
Newer movie.
I mean, that's how old I am now. It's like, to me,
Right.
10 years ago wasn't that long ago. Uh, but
One
it's
last thing, though, I
yeah.
wanted to, before we go,
Yeah.
I just want to let everybody know, whoever's listening to this, that there was a song from the '60s by Zager and Evans,
Mm.
and it's called, "In the Year 2525." You know, and it. Do you know that song?
Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody cut Metropolis, the movie Metropolis, to that song, and they just nailed it. You know,
Mm. It's
if
sort of
anybody's interested, try to look up Zager and Evans in the year and Metropolis, and it's like a 3-minute video. They did a really good job.
it's a bit like when you listen to Dark Side of the Moon and you watch it with Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. You watch it with The Wizard of Oz. It syncs up perfectly.
Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah.
I'll take a look. Is there a YouTube on it?
Oh, I'm sure there is. But yes, two movies about a society that collapses, and in a way, I guess THX could sort of be a sequel to Metropolis in a way. But yeah, watch the behind the scenes stuff on THX as well. It's incredible to see. I mean, that movie's much more in tune with sort of George Lucas's psychosis, because he's kind of a very negative kind of person in real life. And that movie reflects more of it. And he kind of got stuck in the light, fluffy realm with Star Wars, because it was made for 12-year-olds. Although in Revenge of the Sith, they murder little kids and burn a man half alive, and a bunch of kids are killed in the Clone Wars. It's still something essentially good. Fuck them. Yeah, no,
Man, you are busting me on language, and then you say something like that.
whatever. But you see, but it's still kind of made for kids. The THX isn't. It's a George Lucas film with nudity. All right, that gives you an idea of what it's like. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for talking
Fun,
about
Mike.
movies. Yeah, I think you guys should really check these out. A good history lesson in film. We'll see what the next dystopian films are. Maybe we'll do a little bit of Night of the Living Dead and 28 Days Later, and see, because
Yeah, that's a good one.
zombie apocalypse. Yeah. So we'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much. Remember to check out ravenswoodmedia.com, where you can check out all David McGowan stuff, or Google the movie Mark of the Maker. His 1991 film, nominated for an Oscar in 92. Short documentary film about how people made paper without having to kill trees. It's possible, folks. Okay? All right.
All right, thanks, Mike.
Check out You'll Probably Agree at ypareviews.com. Thanks a lot, folks. Bye-bye.